So the human heart, right, it only pumps about 30% of the blood in your body.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it sounds completely impossible.
It really does. I mean, if you're listening to this and thinking that sounds completely wrong, you aren't alone.
Not at all.
But today we're taking a deep dive into an excerpted transcript from it's episode 130 of the Ultimate Human podcast with Gary Brecka. And this source claims that the other 70% of your circulation is actually controlled by these microscopic, rhythmic, almost like snakes inside your blood vessel.
Right. Yeah, the vasomotion.
Exactly. And even more surprising than that, the source material actually argues that you can hack this entire internal plumbing system using, well, basically nothing but a highly specialized red light bulb.
Yeah, it's wild.
So welcome to the deep dive. We are, as always, stripping away the noise to find those aha moments that you can actually use in your everyday life.
It is so good to be here. And, when you look at the landscape of modern wellness today, it's just,
Yeah.
it's incredibly saturated with gadgets, right?
Oh, totally. Gadgets everywhere.
Yeah, people are constantly looking for these biological shortcuts. And as a result, we are just bombarded with claims that, honestly, they often lack any foundational science.
Right. It's just marketing.
Exactly. So our mission today is to look purely at the biological mechanics. We really want to determine if this specific intervention using red light is a legitimate, scientifically backed tool for human health, or if it's, just another overpriced trend that's going to fade away.
And the claims in this specific source text, I mean, they are massive. The host of the source material literally states that out of all the cutting-edge biohacking devices available today, all of them, if they had to strip everything away and keep just one single device, it would be a red light therapy bed.
Which is a huge statement.
It really is. To put that in context, they are choosing this over hyperbaric oxygen chambers,
Yeah.
over cold plunges.
Saunas.
Yeah, saunas. And even those PEMF mats, the pads that use pulsed electromagnetic fields to stimulate cellular activity.
Right, the really high-end stuff.
Yeah. Out of all of that, a bed of red lights takes the crown. So, okay, let's unpack this. How can just standing in front of a light bulb fundamentally alter your cellular health to the point where it beats out every single other therapy?
Well, we connect this to the bigger picture. What we're really talking about here is a clinical process called photobiomodulation.
Photobiomodulation.
Yeah, so photo meaning light, bio obviously meaning biology, and modulation meaning to alter or adjust.
Right.
So we are looking at how specific wavelengths of light physically interact with and actually change biological functions right at the cellular level.
So it's not just like warming you up.
No, not at all. The text focuses heavily on the 670 nanometer wavelengths, which sits right in the red and near infrared spectrum. The goal isn't just to broadly say, red light is good for you. The goal today is to trace the exact literal chain reaction that happens when a 670 nanometer photon physically hits a human cell.
I really prefer that term, honestly, photobiomodulation. Because, red light therapy sounds a bit like a passive spa day.
Yeah, a bit fluffy.
Right. But photobiomodulation sounds like we are actively altering the machinery of the body.
Because we are.
And to really grasp how this works, we have to go back to that wild statistic about the heart. Because we all grow up learning the heart is the sole engine of the body, right?
That's what the textbooks say.
Exactly. It beats, blood moves. End of story. But the text paints a completely different picture. It suggests the heart is more like the central water pump at a city reservoir.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it provides the initial pressure, sure, but 70% of the actual work of moving the water to the individual houses, the actual delivery, is being done by the pipes themselves.
Right. The heart provides this massive macroscopic push. It generates the high pressure that's necessary to force the oxygenated blood out through the aorta and into the major arteries.
Those big highways.
Exactly, the big highways. But as those arteries branch off into smaller and smaller vessels, down to the arterioles and eventually the microscopic capillaries, that initial pressure from the heart, it drops off significantly.
It just loses momentum.
Yes, if the human body relied strictly on the heart's pumping action to force this thick blood through tens of thousands of miles of microscopic capillaries, the whole system would just stall out.
Wow.
The blood would pool in the extremities. The tissues would just stagnate.
So the blood vessels are literally doing the heavy lifting there.
You absolutely are.
And the source material uses this incredibly visceral analogy to describe how they do it. It calls the action vasomotion and describes it as looking like a snake swallowing a mouse. which
Mm.
is quite the visual.
It's very vivid, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's accurate. Vasomotion or vasomotor activity is the spontaneous, independent constriction and relaxation of the blood vessels.
Okay.
Your blood vessels, they are not static PVC pipes. They are lined with smooth muscle.
Oh, I didn't realize they had their own muscle.
They do. And they actively pulse and squeeze in this peristaltic wave-like motion. That rhythmic squeezing, that snake-like action is what physically pushes the blood through the incredibly dense network of your microcirculation. That is what accounts for that remaining 70% of the circulatory burden.
And this microcirculation, from what I understand, is the only part of the system that actually matters when it comes to keeping tissues alive.
What are you going to show?
Like the major arteries are just the highways. The capillaries are the local delivery roads where the oxygen is actually dropped off to the cells, the nutrients are unloaded, and the metabolic waste is picked up.
Exactly.
So if the snake falls asleep, the tissue basically starves.
It starves.
Mhm.
And we see the harsh reality of that in chronic conditions. The text highlights how impaired microcirculation is a hallmark of diseases like diabetes or severe hypertension.
Yeah. Right. Let's talk about what that actually feels like for a person. Because we hear the word neuropathy a lot, especially in relation to diabetes. What exactly is happening when that vasomotion fails, say, in a diabetic patient's foot?
Well, chronically high blood sugar is highly abrasive. It's damaging. It creates this toxic environment that physically damages the delicate inner lining of the blood vessels.
Like it's scraping the pipes.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
And when those vessels become damaged and inflamed, they lose their ability to perform that spontaneous vasomotion. The smooth muscle stays rigidly constricted.
So the snake just stops moving.
It stops moving. The
Okay.
capillaries narrow. Suddenly, the nerves in the foot are no longer receiving their constant necessary supply of oxygen and glucose.
Oh, wow.
So that sensation of neuropathy, the numbness, the sharp tingling, that feeling of walking on pins and needles, that is the neurological consequence of the tissue actively suffocating. The local delivery roads have literally been shut down.
Which is terrifying, honestly. But it brings us directly to the core mechanism of today's deep dive. If the internal signaling is broken and the snake has stopped swallowing the mouse, how does shining a 670 nanometer red light on your skin fix the plumbing?
We have to trace the photon to understand it. The 670 nanometer wavelengths is highly specific, mostly because of its penetration depth.
Okay, what does that mean?
Well, think about ultraviolet light. UV light stops right at the surface of the skin. That's what causes a sunburn and cellular damage.
Right, skin deep.
Then you have blue light, which penetrates slightly deeper but scatters very quickly. But red and near infrared light, they are different. They can pass completely through the dermal and subdermal layers without causing any thermal damage.
Just so they don't burn you.
Exactly. They physically reach the blood vessels residing beneath the skin.
So it is absolutely not a heat treatment. It's not like sitting in a sauna and making yourself sweat to increase your heart rate. The light itself is crossing the barrier.
Yes. And once it crosses that barrier, it interacts with the mitochondria inside your cells.
The powerhouse of the cell, right?
We all remember that from high school biology. The mitochondria are the powerhouses, the energy producers. And inside the mitochondria is a specific enzyme called cytochrome C oxidase.
Cytochrome C oxidase.
Right. This enzyme acts as a photoreceptor. It literally absorbs the red light photons.
Wait, it absorbs light, like a plant.
Very similar to photosynthesis in a way, yeah. When cytochrome-cotic oxidase absorbs that 670 nanometer light, it triggers a massive cascade of cellular energy production. But crucially for our conversation today, it also kicks out a very specific molecule.
And the text identifies this molecule as nitric oxide.
Yes, exactly. The light stimulates the endothelial cells, which is that ultra-thin layer of cells lining the inside of the blood vessel, to suddenly release a massive surge of nitric oxide.
Now, nitric oxide is a huge buzzword, especially in the fitness community.
Oh, absolutely.
People take beet juice extract, they take all these pre-workout powders, specifically to boost nitric oxide because they want a pump in the gym.
They want it because nitric oxide is a very potent vasodilator.
Meaning it opens the vessels.
Exactly. It acts as a signaling molecule. The moment it's released by the endothelial cells, it signals the smooth muscle wrapping the outside of the blood vessel to instantly relax.
Right.
The rigid constriction releases. The vessel widens. The capacity of the pipe physically expands.
So you're forcing it open.
You are artificially and externally compelling the blood vessel to dilate, which drastically improves the delivery of blood, oxygen, and nutrients. You are forcing the vasomotion to restart.
Okay, let me stop you right there because I'm stuck on something and I want to make sure you, the listener, are tracking with this too. If the light is only hitting the superficial blood vessels, the ones just beneath the skin, how does that translate to a systemic benefit?
That's a great question.
Because nitric oxide is a gas, right? Doesn't it have an incredibly short half-life in the body?
It does.
So if I shine a light on my chest, how on earth is that helping a deep muscle in my leg or like an internal organ?
It is a vital distinction to make, and it's where a lot of people get confused. Nitric oxide itself does have a half-life measured in mere seconds. Yeah. It acts locally and degrades incredibly rapidly.
Yeah.
However, when you expose a large surface area of the body to photobiomodulation, say by using a full light panel or a bed, you are triggering this endothelial release of nitric oxide across a massive network of superficial capillaries, all simultaneously.
Okay.
While the free nitric oxide gas degrades quickly, it initiates secondary chemical messengers and creates stable nitrite reserves in the bloodstream.
Nitrate reserves.
Yes, these stable compounds, they circulate systemically throughout the entire body. And when they reach an area of the body that is hypoxic, meaning it's starved of oxygen and highly acidic, like a fatigued muscle or a damaged organ, those nitrates break back down into active nitric oxide.
Wait, really?
Yes, triggering vasodilation exactly where it is needed most, deep inside the body.
That is fascinating. So the skin is basically acting as this massive solar panel, harvesting the light to produce a chemical reservoir that the rest of the body can then just draw from whenever it needs it.
Precisely. You are using a non-invasive light source to create a biological bypass. You are overriding the internal damage caused by chronic inflammation or metabolic disease and manually flicking the switch to dilate the blood vessels.
That is, that's just incredible. And once you grasp that foundational mechanism, right, that red light physically forces microvascular dilation, suddenly, the practical applications mentioned in the source material stop sounding like magic and start sounding like just basic physics.
Right. It becomes very logical.
Exactly. And the text points heavily to athletic recovery as a prime example of this. It notes that professional athletes are aggressively adopting this technology.
The athletic application is incredibly well documented, mostly because the results are highly measurable. When an athlete undergoes an intense training session, they're basically creating a metabolic crisis in their muscle tissue.
It's like a city that just hosted a chaotic, massive festival. The roads are absolutely gridlocked. The muscle tissue is flooded with lactic acid. Calcium ions are pooling everywhere. And the muscle fibers are just full of microtears.
That is a perfect analogy. The body desperately needs to clear that metabolic debris and bring in raw materials for repair. By applying red light therapy post-workout, you are forcing that immediate massive vasodilation we just talked about.
Opening up the roads.
You turn a congested 2-lane road into an 8-lane superhighway. The arterial supply trucks rush in loaded with oxygen, glucose, and amino acids. And simultaneously, the venous garbage trucks speed in to haul away all that lactic acid and the inflammatory cytokines that actually cause muscle fatigue.
And the text cites studies from Frontiers in Physiology demonstrating exactly this. It isn't just athletes saying, oh, I feel less sore today.
No, it's our data.
They are measuring tangible reductions in delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS. They are seeing much faster clearance of blood lactate levels compared to control groups who don't use the light.
Right. In a typical clinical study of this nature, you might have one group of athletes perform heavy eccentric exercise.
Like heavy squats.
Exactly. And then they follow that up with a sham light treatment, meaning a light that looks red but doesn't actually have that specific 670 nanometer irradiance, while the other group receives true photobiomodulation.
So the placebo group doesn't know they're getting the fake light.
Exactly. And the group receiving the true treatment consistently shows significantly lower levels of creatine kinase in their blood over the next 48 hours.
What does that indicate?
Well, creatine kinase is an enzyme that leaks out of damaged muscle fibers. So lower levels mean less muscle damage and much faster cellular repair. It is empirical, measurable data proving the superhighway is actually working.
If the mechanism is that effective at clearing out the debris of just a heavy workout, what happens when you point that exact same mechanism at tissue that isn't just tired, but is actually dying? Because the text moves from sore muscles to some very, very serious medical conditions, specifically impaired wound healing and retinal damage.
And what's fascinating here is that this is where photobiomodulation shifts from just an optimization tool, biohack, to a truly critical intervention. Take a diabetic foot ulcer, which, as we mentioned, is a common and devastating consequence of neuropathy. You have an open wound, But the surrounding microvasculature is so compromised that the body simply cannot deliver the necessary immune cells like macrophages to clean the wound.
The roads are closed?
The roads are closed. It cannot deliver the fibroblasts needed to lay down new tissue. The wound simply stalls. It won't heal.
It's essentially a dead zone. The supply line is totally cut.
Applying localized red light therapy to that stalled wound manually restarts the supply lines.
Just by shining the light on the wound.
Yes. The photons penetrate the edges of the wound. They hit the remaining viable endothelial cells that are still there. They trigger the nitric oxide release. The vessels dilate, and suddenly a flood of oxygenated blood rushes into the dead zone.
Wow.
You are artificially creating the biological environment required for the healing cascade to resume. It can literally be the difference between a wound slowly closing over weeks or progressing to a state of gangrene where amputation is the only medical option left.
You are using light to physically keep the tissue on life support until it can heal itself.
That's exactly what it is.
That is a very heavy concept, and it completely reframes how we have to look at the next major section of the source material. Because we've talked about localized healing and muscle recovery. But the text makes a massive leap here into systemic, long-term disease prevention.
Right, moving from acute to chronic.
Yeah. It claims that red light therapy offers serious cardiovascular defense, specifically pointing to another 2022 study in Frontiers in Physiology, noting its ability to help prevent the buildup of arterial plaque.
Which is a huge claim.
Huge. And here's where it gets really interesting and where you, the listener, might naturally get a bit skeptical. Plaque builds up on the inside of the major arteries, deep in the chest, wrapping right around the heart. We just established that the light only penetrates the skin and superficial tissues.
Yes.
Even with the circulating nitrites we discussed earlier, how does a surface-level light treatment actually prevent atherosclerosis? Because we're taught that's driven by diet, genetics, and cholesterol.
Well, answering that requires us to completely update our understanding of what actually causes heart disease.
Okay.
For decades, the public has been taught that arterial plaque is simply a plumbing problem. You eat too much fat, and it clogs the pipes like grease in a sink.
Right, the bacon grease analogy.
Exactly. But modern cardiology recognizes that atherosclerosis is fundamentally an inflammatory disease driven by oxidative stress.
Let's define oxidative stress, because that is a term thrown around in every single wellness article online, usually right before they try to sell you like an expensive blueberry supplement.
All right, it's very overused. But scientifically, oxidative stress occurs when there is a severe imbalance inside your cells. Normal metabolism, as well as exposure to environmental toxins, produces free radicals.
Free radicals?
Yes. These are highly unstable molecules that are missing an electron. Because they are unstable, they aggressively steal electrons from surrounding healthy cells, completely damaging their structure.
Like little cellular vandals.
Yes. Now, your body naturally uses antioxidants to neutralize them. But when the free radicals outnumber your available antioxidants, you have oxidative stress.
Okay, track that. But how does that relate to the arteries getting clogged?
When oxidative stress is chronically high, those free radicals damage the delicate endothelial lining of the major arteries.
Okay.
The body recognizes this damage, and it mounts an immune response. It triggers inflammation to fix the injury. The problem is, if the oxidative stress never stops, the inflammation never stops either. It becomes chronic.
So the artery is just constantly inflamed and irritated.
Constantly. So the body desperately tries to patch the continually inflamed, damaged arterial wall. And the patching material it uses, that is a mixture of cholesterol, calcium, and cellular waste. That patch is arterial plaque.
Whoa. So the plaque is actually just a very dangerous scab forming over a constantly irritated artery.
Exactly. It's a symptom, not the root cause.
Yeah.
So how does photobiomodulation interrupt this deep internal process? It goes right back to the mitochondria and the cytochrome cycloxidase. When you use a full-body red light panel, you are drastically increasing mitochondrial efficiency across a massive surface area of your body.
Right. Millions of cells at once.
Millions. This massive energy boost upregulates the body's own internal antioxidant defense systems. You're systemically lowering the global burden of oxidative stress across the entire body.
So the blood circulating back to the heart coming from the skin and muscles that were exposed to the light, it's chemically different.
Yes, it is.
It is carrying fewer inflammatory markers.
Yes. You are literally cooling down the systemic inflammatory fire. If the blood rushing through the coronary arteries is less toxic and less inflamed, the endothelial lining of those arteries doesn't sustain the continuous damage.
So no damage, no scab.
Precisely. The body no longer feels the biological imperative to keep laying down those cholesterol patches. You aren't using the light to magically melt away existing plaque. You are changing the underlying chemical environment of the cardiovascular system so the plaque doesn't form in the first place.
It is preventative maintenance at the most foundational systemic level.
It really is.
And the source text applies this exact same logic of systemic maintenance to an organ that is even more complex than the heart, the brain. The deep dive introduces some pretty massive cognitive benefits. It lists improved cerebral blood flow, better focus, memory retention, and even mood regulation.
Yeah, the brain benefits are incredible.
But I imagine a lot of people picture this as like putting a red light helmet on and shining the light directly into the brain tissue. And while I know there are specific devices designed for the head, the text focuses heavily on vasomotor stability in the brain as a systemic effect.
Right.
Can you clarify the mechanism here? How much of this is light penetrating the actual skull versus the systemic blood flow improvement we just discussed?
Well, that is a subject of intense debate and ongoing research in the photobiomodulation field right now. Near-infrared light, particularly around the 800 to 1064 nanometer range, actually has a surprising ability to penetrate bone.
Really?
Yeah, it could pass through the human skull and deliver photons directly to the cortical layers of the brain. However, the 670 nanometer wavelength highlighted in our source text has much less penetration power through thick bone.
So if it's not direct illumination of the brain tissue in this case, the cognitive benefits must be entirely downstream of the cardiovascular benefits.
They are inextricably linked. You have to remember, the brain is the single most energy-demanding organ in the human body.
Right.
It represents about maybe 2% of your body weight, but it consumes 20% of your oxygen and glucose.
Yeah.
To maintain that massive metabolic engine, it requires an incredibly dense, flawlessly optimized microvascular network. It is completely reliant on that microscopic plumbing we've been talking about.
So if the microcirculation in the body is failing, the microcirculation in the brain is failing too.
Absolutely. And when you use red light therapy systemically, you are enhancing the flexibility and responsiveness of the endothelial lining everywhere. You are globally improving vasomotion.
The snake swallowing the mouse?
Exactly. This ensures that the tiniest capillaries feeding the neurons in the brain are functioning at peak capacity. The text actually cites a 2022 study from Frontiers in Neuroscience that links this enhanced cerebral blood flow to a reduced risk of vascular-related cognitive declines, specifically calling out Alzheimer's disease and dementia.
Which is fascinating because we usually talk about Alzheimer's as purely a neurological disease, right? It's characterized by those amyloid plaques and tau tangles building up inside the brain tissue itself. It's almost always viewed as this inevitable degradation of the neurons.
That is the traditional neurological view, yes, but it is shifting rapidly.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The neurovascular hypothesis of Alzheimer's suggests that the disease is deeply rooted in broken plumbing. Before the plaques and tangles ever form, the microcirculation in the brain begins to degrade due to aging, chronic inflammation, or metabolic syndrome. The capillaries narrow. The brain's ability to clear out daily metabolic waste is severely compromised.
So the garbage trucks can't get in to clear the waste.
Exactly.
So the waste piles up, and that waste eventually forms the plaques.
Exactly. The neurons are starving for oxygen while simultaneously suffocating in their own metabolic byproducts. By utilizing photobiomodulation to maintain systemic vasomotor stability, you are keeping the brain's supply lines open and its waste clearance systems highly active.
That makes so much sense.
And knowledge is only valuable when applied. Understanding that brain fog, memory loss, and cognitive decline are often vascular issues changes everything. It means cognitive aging isn't just a neurological lottery. You actually have biological levers you can pull to maintain the infrastructure of your mind.
You are actively maintaining the physical roads your thoughts travel on. That is a brilliant way to frame it. Let's pivot from the hidden internal infrastructure to the highly visible exterior. Because the deep dive source material spends a significant amount of time on aesthetic rejuvenation and musculoskeletal repair. Let's look at the skin first. The claims include reduced wrinkles, the smoothing of fine lines, and basically reversing skin sagging.
The anti-aging claims.
Yes. And the cosmetic industry is a multi-billion-dollar machine built on selling creams and serums that claim to do exactly this. But most of those are topical. They sit on the surface of the skin, maybe trap some moisture to temporarily plump things up, but they just wash off at the end of the day.
Right. They are temporary.
But the text argues that red light therapy is fundamentally different because it acts as an anti-aging cellular engine. So what is the biological mechanism separating this from, a $200 moisturizer?
The difference lies entirely in where the intervention actually occurs. A topical cream hydrates the dead layer of skin cells on the very surface. Photobiomodulation penetrates down into the dermis, which is the living layer of the skin, and the text highlights a very specific target down there: fibroblast activity.
Okay, what exactly is it a fibroblast, and what is its job?
Fibroblasts are specialized cells that reside within your connective tissue.
Yeah,
You can think of them as the primary manufacturing factories of the skin.
the factories.
Right. Their entire biological purpose is to synthesize and secrete the structural proteins that give tissue its form. They produce collagen, which acts as the rigid scaffolding providing firmness.
Everyone knows collagen.
Exactly. They produce elastin, which gives the skin its elasticity, its ability to stretch and snap back into place. And they produce fibrin, which is crucial for wound healing and structural integrity.
So if we use an analogy here, applying a traditional anti-aging cream is kind of like taking an aging, deteriorating brick wall and just smearing a layer of spackle over the cracks.
That's great visual.
Yeah, like it might look a little smoother from a distance, but the structural integrity of the wall is still completely failing. The bricks are still crumbling behind the spackle.
That captures it perfectly. As we age, or as we accumulate damage from UV sun exposure, the natural activity of our fibroblasts slows down drastically.
The factory shut down.
The factory shut down, the
Yep.
production of fresh collagen and elastin drops off. That structural deficit is the literal physiological cause of wrinkles, hollows, and sagging skin.
Mm-hmm.
The wall is literally losing its bricks.
So photobiomodulation isn't spackling the wall. It is penetrating the wall, walking into the factory, and forcing the workers back onto the assembly line.
Exactly. By delivering those 670 nanometer photons to the cytochrome C oxidase inside the fibroblast, you are providing the raw cellular energy required to upregulate their production. You are artificially stimulating the factories to manufacture massive amounts of fresh, highly organized collagen and elastin.
So you're rebuilding it.
You are physically rebuilding the dermis from the inside out. It is true cellular rejuvenation, not just a cosmetic illusion.
And the beauty of this biological mechanism is that it doesn't just apply to vanity. The exact same concept, stimulating the body's internal factories to repair structural damage, is how red light therapy addresses deep tissue and bone injuries.
Yes, the mechanism scales.
The text transitions into musculoskeletal benefits, referencing the Journal of Photochemistry and Photobiology. It talks about accelerating the repair of osteoarthritis, chronic tendinitis, and severe muscle strains. Now, if someone has severe osteoarthritis in their knee, their standard medical protocol is usually endless cycles of NSAIDs like anti-inflammatory pills or eventually corticosteroid injections.
Which are purely palliative measures. They just manage symptoms.
Right.
Pharmaceuticals like ibuprofen block the pain-signaling enzymes, or in the case of steroids, they violently suppress the local immune response. They reduce the swelling, which reduces the pain, but they do absolutely nothing to regenerate the degraded cartilage inside the knee joint.
Actually, don't steroid shots make it worse over time?
Yes, repeated steroid injections can actually accelerate the degradation of the cartilage over time.
So they are literally just turning off the check engine light on the dashboard without actually fixing the engine.
Exactly.
So how does the light fix the engine?
It acts on multiple fronts simultaneously. First, the light penetrates deep into the joint capsule, triggering the nitric oxide release we discussed earlier, which naturally flushes out the localized inflammatory cytokines, causing the swelling and the pain.
So it clears the junk out.
Yes. Second, and much more importantly, it activates the local stem cells and fibroblasts within the joint space itself. Just like it stimulates collagen production in the skin, it provides the massive burst of cellular energy ATP required for these cells to synthesize new cartilage, repair micro tears in the tendons, and lay down new bone matrix.
That's incredible.
You are giving the joint the metabolic currency it needs to physically rebuild the degraded connective tissue.
It is a regenerative therapy, not just a painkiller,
Exactly.
which makes total sense as to why it is exploding in popularity. But this brings us to the final major hurdle discussed in the source material: accessibility, devices, and the democratization of wellness. Because up until very recently, if you wanted to experience this level of systemic cellular repair, you had to be like a professional athlete with a team doctor, or you had to be ultra wealthy, visiting highly exclusive functional medicine clinics.
It was incredibly gated.
The technology was gated. So the deep dive asks a very practical question for you listening. How does the average person actually navigate this space and use this science today?
Well, The source text breaks down the current landscape of devices very systematically, categorizing them by use case and accessibility. And this is where we really have to merge the biological science with practical application, because the efficacy of the treatment is entirely dependent on matching the correct device to your desired outcome.
Let's walk through the exact gear they outline. The most common entry point they mention are face masks. You see these all over social media. People look like Iron Man sitting on their couch watching Netflix.
Yeah, they are very popular. Face masks are designed with a very specific, localized intent. They typically utilize red and near-infrared diodes calibrated purely for the depth of facial skin. The text notes their primary advantage is affordability and ease of use.
They're super accessible.
Right. They integrate seamlessly into a daily routine.
So if your only goal is aesthetic-like, if you are specifically chasing the fibroblast stimulation, the collagen production, and the reduction of fine lines, this is the perfect tool. You don't need a massive, complex setup to rebuild the brick factory in your facial skin.
Exactly. But it is crucial to understand their limitations. You can't expect systemic results from them. The next category the text covers are handheld devices.
Okay, these are roughly the size of a flashlight or a small wand, right? They seem incredibly versatile.
They are the sniper rifles of photobiomodulation.
Sniper rifles, I like that.
They have a very small surface area, but often have a high power output, or irradiance. The text points out that these are ideal for acute, targeted musculoskeletal repair.
So like injuries.
Yes. If you have chronic patellar tendinitis in your knee, or tennis elbow, or a localized muscle tear, you press the handheld device directly against the skin over the injury. It concentrates the photon delivery exactly where the structural repair is needed most.
But again, it's a localized treatment. If we want the systemic benefits, the cardiovascular defense, the brain health, the massive vascular optimization, the text moves us up to red light panels.
Right. Panels represent the middle ground of the market. They are much larger arrays of LEDs that you might hang on the back of a door or mount on a stand.
Like the size of a full-length mirror.
Sometimes, yeah, or half that size. Because they have a significantly larger surface area, they can irradiate the entire torso or the entire back all at once. They're excellent for addressing large areas of muscle soreness, resolving systemic back pain, and beginning to trigger enough global nitric oxide release to actually influence your overall circulation.
And then we reach the absolute apex of the technology, the device that the host of our source material explicitly stated they would keep over every single other biohack, the full red light beds.
The full beds are the ultimate photobiomodulation experience. They look like tanning beds, but they are engineered to completely envelop the human body in the 670 nanometer wavelength.
Head to toe.
Head to toe. Every square inch of skin is exposed simultaneously. This ensures the absolute maximum possible stimulation of the endothelial network and the largest systemic release of nitric oxide and those circulating nitrites we talked about.
But the text does not shy away from the massive barrier to entry here. These beds are clinical-grade medical devices. They carry a 5 to 6 figure price tag. We are talking $30, $50, even $100,000.
They are massive investments.
Yeah, that is entirely out of the realm of possibility for 99% of the population. However, the source provides the modern solution, the rapid rise of wellness center memberships.
This is the true democratization of the technology. The text highlights that you no longer need to purchase a clinical bed to access clinical results. Specialized wellness clinics, high-end gyms, and recovery centers are purchasing these machines and offering them to the public through monthly memberships.
It is essentially a timeshare for cellular regeneration.
That's exactly what it is.
But if I am navigating all of this, dealing with the information overload we talked about at the very beginning of the show, I might look at a $100,000 bed and a $50 face mask on Amazon and assume they are doing the exact same thing. Is a cheap face mask going to give me the systemic cardiovascular benefits, the arterial plaque reduction, or the brain health optimization?
No, it absolutely will not. And this is where critical thinking is so required. In photomedicine, we talk heavily about dosing.
Dosing, like with medicine.
Exactly like medicine. The dose is determined by the irradiance, which is the power of the light, the duration of the exposure, and crucially, the surface area exposed. A face mask covers roughly 5% of your body's surface area.
Right.
It physically cannot stimulate enough blood vessels to create the systemic surge of nitric oxide required to clear full-body lactic acid, stabilize your cerebral microvasculature, or alter the inflammatory environment of your major arteries.
It just isn't a large enough dose to trigger a systemic cascade.
Correct. If your goal is systemic health, If you are trying to manage chronic whole-body inflammation, combat vascular aging, or recover from an intense marathon, buying a cheap, localized device will only lead to frustration.
You'll just think it's fake.
Exactly. You will conclude that the science is a scam, when in reality you simply use the wrong tool for the job. For systemic issues, the scientifically sound approach outlined in the text is to seek out a clinic membership. Using a full bed allows you to experience the true, whole-body biological mechanism without taking on a massive financial burden.
You have to match the delivery system to the physiological outcome you want. Don't expect full-body miracles from a targeted cosmetic tool.
Exactly.
We have covered immense ground today, tracing the journey of a single photon from the surface of the skin down into the microscopic engine of the cell, and extrapolating that all the way out to systemic longevity. So what does this all mean? Let's distill everything we've uncovered from this source text into the core takeaways you can actually use. First, photobiomodulation is not a fringe biohacking trend or a placebo effect fueled by wellness jargon.
Not at all.
It is a profound, highly documented biological intervention backed by extensive peer-reviewed literature in journals like Frontiers in Physiology and Frontiers in Neuroscience.
The science is there.
Second, the entire therapy rests on a single, undeniable biological foundation. Specific wavelengths of light, particularly around 670 nanometers, penetrate the skin, enter the mitochondria, and stimulate cytochrome C oxidase. This triggers the endothelial cells to release nitric oxide, which forces the blood vessels to dilate.
It's mechanical.
It manually unlocks and optimizes the 70% of our circulatory system that relies entirely on spontaneous vasomotion.
And third, because it optimizes that foundational microvascular infrastructure, the downstream effects are just staggering. By simply restoring blood flow and cellular energy production, it offers profound benefits across the entire spectrum of human health.
It touches everything.
It really does. We are looking at rapid athletic recovery, the prevention of tissue death and chronic wounds, deep structural regeneration of joints and skin, and the long-term defense against devastating systemic conditions like arterial plaque and vascular dementia. It achieves all of this simply by supercharging the body's natural healing and signaling pathways with virtually no recorded side effects.
It is a fundamental systemic upgrade to the human machine.
As we conclude this deep dive, I want to address you, the listener, directly. Navigating the world of health information can feel like a full-time job.
Yeah, it really can.
But understanding these foundational biological mechanisms gives you agency. Managing your health, ensuring your longevity, optimizing your daily life is not just about the food you eat, the supplements you swallow, or how heavy the weights are that you lift in the gym. It is fundamentally about how you manage your cellular environment. Your cells are constantly reading and reacting to the physical energy surrounding you, and light is one of those powerful environmental inputs we have.
That is an incredibly empowering perspective, and it leads perfectly into the final thought I want to leave you with today. We have just spent this entire session exploring how profoundly our internal biology, our vital blood flow, our cognitive sharpness, our ability to heal physical damage is dictated by our exposure to a very specific natural wavelength of red and near-infrared light.
Yeah.
It forces you to look at the modern world through a completely different lens. If our bodies are this desperately reliant on and responsive to this specific spectrum of light, what are we doing to our cellular engines every single day?
That's the big question.
We live our entire lives indoors. We slather on sunscreen the moment we step outside, blocking the natural spectrum of the sun. We bathe ourselves from the moment we wake up until midnight in the artificial high-energy blue light of computer screens, smartphones, and LED office lights wavelength that do absolutely nothing to trigger these regenerative mitochondrial processes.
Nothing at all.
Are we, as a modern society, living in a constant, unrecognized state of chronic light malnourishment? We obsess over our macronutrients, but are we completely starving ourselves of the photobiological nutrients they evolved to run on? And if so, is this absence of natural regenerative light a hidden root cause of the chronic fatigue, brain fog, and systemic inflammation we see skyrocketing everywhere today?
That is a critical question. It takes photobiomodulation completely out of the realm of an optional biohack and reframes it as an essential supplementation for an environmental nutrient that our modern lifestyle has basically eradicated. It is absolutely a concept worth exploring as you continue to map out your own approach to health and longevity.
I completely agree. Thank you all for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep questioning the world around you, keep exploring the science, and we will see you next time.